Most people operate at a physical debt, running on fumes, constantly fatigued, being out of shape, and not comfortable in their own bodies, and never reaching their true potential. But what if you could level up your body just like you do in your business? That's exactly what the physical wealth standard is about. Your body is either working for you or against you, and most people don't realize they're running at 50% of their potential. In this video, I will break down the metrics and physical wealth standards you should aspire to so that you can operate at peak physical capacity, but also be at optimal health well into your 40s, 50s, and 60s, and even beyond. In the high-stakes world of elite professionals and entrepreneurs, peak physical performance isn't just a luxury, it's a necessity. The physical wealth standard is a benchmark for strength, cardiovascular fitness, and recovery that helps ambitious, high-achieving individuals assess and optimize their bodies for sustained energy resilience and longevity. Just as financial wealth provides security and opportunity, physical wealth measured through key performance indicators like strength levels, endurance, VO2 max, sleep quality, and heart rate variability ensures you operate at your best. When your body is a liability rather than an asset, it drains productivity, it drains focus and leadership potential. This standard isn't about vanity, it's about maintaining a high performance engine that allows you to outwork, outthink, and outlast the competition while avoiding the physical debt that leads to burnout, chronic fatigue, and preventable health decline. The physical wealth standard is a benchmark for key areas of human performance. Strength training is a proxy for physical performance. To develop a high level of strength requires discipline and consistency. Also, good sleep hygiene, nutrition optimized, and quality training. Cardio fitness relates to how efficiently you can produce and sustain energy. And of course, recovery. How well do you recover and regulate stress? These three categories dictate how you feel, perform, and sustain energy levels throughout your day. If you are constantly drained, struggling with focus, or battling stress, chances are you're operating below your physical wealth potential. Okay, so let's dig into it. So why pushing to intermediate and advanced levels matters. So why should you care about pushing your strength, endurance, and recovery metrics to an intermediate or advanced level? Because your physiology dictates your performance. Here's what happens when you level up your physical wealth. Strength training increases testosterone and growth hormone levels, improving mental drive and resilience. That also relates to women as well. Higher cardiovascular capacity enhances oxygen efficiency, making you more mentally sharp and fatigue resistant. Optimized recovery leads to better sleep cycles and improved stress regulation and longer peak performance hours. So think about it. The most successful leaders, CEOs, and high performers prioritize their health because they know that their body is the vehicle for success. If you don't invest in it, you'll pay for it later in burnout, illness, and lost productivity. So where do you stand? Where do you rank on a physical wealth standard? Are you in the top 5% operating like an elite performer, or are you stuck in the physical debt zone, constantly playing catch up with your energy levels? So looking at the strength standards will focus on exercises like the deadlift, squat, bench press, and pull-ups. These standards are typically expressed relative to body weight and categorized by experience levels. So we'll work with the categories as below. So untrained, no training experience; novice, training for several months; intermediate, consistent training for 1 to 2 years; advanced, significant training for multiple years; and then elite level, which is competitive level of training. So you'd be in that category if you've been training for a long time and your strength is at such an advanced level that you can compete. But for most people, if you've been training for a little while, you probably fall into the intermediate and advanced levels. And that is ideally where you want to be if you are not already. To be functioning at optimal level, I believe you should be at intermediate to advanced level on all these data points. If you're below that level, if you're like a novice and you've been training for a while, then something's off and you need to push those levels up. And obviously this is a area that you want to be striving towards and aspire to ensure that your body is and your physiology is optimal. So starting with the deadlift, obviously these values are approximate on the one repetition maximums. I've sourced where I've got this data from. And obviously we're looking at the experience levels, which I've mentioned before. And then obviously we've broken up into men and women 1RMs. So for that intermediate level, you want to be around 2 times body weight for men and 1.25 body weight for women. And advanced would be 2.5, and then obviously women would be 1.75. So I'm not going to go through all of the data here, but you can obviously see where you fall into that category and then see if you need to work to get into this area here to ensure that your body's function optimally going forwards. And if not, then some training would be required. Looking at the squat standards, obviously notably intermediate level would be 1.5 times body weight for men. Women would be 1 times body weight. And then advanced, you're looking at 2 times body weight for men and 1.5 times body weight for women. And obviously we've outlined untrained, novice and elite levels there as well. Looking at the bench standards for intermediate and advanced, 1.25 times body weight for men. Women, that's 0.75 of body weight. And advanced level, you're looking at 1.5 for men and then 1 times for the women. Pull-up standards. Now this is obviously a difficult one because obviously most women can't do a pull-up or are working towards getting consistent with 1 to 3 reps. And then men usually fall somewhere around this region here. But the goal, as mentioned before, is to be getting into this intermediate to advanced level to ensure that you are functioning optimally at your basic physiology, right? So for men, we're looking at least 8 reps for intermediate and getting up towards that 15 for advanced. And if you can do much more, brilliant. And then for women, ideally 3 reps for intermediate and then 8 or above would be good for advanced going forwards. So looking at cardiovascular fitness standards, cardiovascular fitness is often assessed using the VO2 max test, which measures the maximum amount of oxygen the body can utilize during intense exercise. Performance in timed runs can serve as an indicator or a measuring tool, right? So usually we use runs, you can use rows and other equipment, but the performance in timed runs is usually the best indicator, best measuring tool for this. So looking at the VO2 max standards, to be in the, I'd say generally for VO2 max, you want to be in this top 30 to 20% to be functioning optimally. Anything below this, like average, and I mean, that's like the base, the very lowest you should ideally be. And if you're around here, I'd strongly suggest you push this up towards these top 30 and 20%. And if you're below, then obviously you've got a lot of work to do, right? And then obviously looking at men, we're looking at 54.5, 51, and then for women, 44 and 41 respectively. And 1.5 mile run, I think that's 2 kilometers. And obviously helps to approximate the VO2 max as well. And for the top 20, top 30%, you're looking at like 10 minutes, less than 10 minutes. And then for women, you're looking at 11 to 12, 11 and a half minutes for that time. 5K run, top 20 and 30, looking at 20 minutes, 22 minutes. Women 23, 25. And then obviously the average falls around here. And obviously a lot of people would probably fall at average or below. So then this is indicative that you need to work on your cardiovascular fitness to get up into those upper echelons. Looking at recovery and heart health metrics. So recovery metrics like resting heart rate variability, and sleep duration are indicators of cardiovascular health and overall recovery. Resting heart rate serves as a vital indicator of cardiovascular health. So let's go through a breakdown of resting heart rate ranges, their prevalence, and associated health implications. Okay, so looking at these ranges, if your resting heart rate, so this is awake heart rate, but obviously ideally we would want to be looking at your sleep resting heart rate as well. So obviously with these, I'm just going to go off the data I could find up from the CDC about your awake, sitting still resting heart ranges. But as said, sleep and resting heart ranges may be like 5 to 10 beats lower than this. And that's also a very good indicator of how well you're recovering overnight, what kind of quality your sleep is at as well, right? And if your heart rate is very high during sleep, high being above 70 BPM, 60 even for some people, then there's indications that you're not sleeping well, the quality of your sleep's really low, and your heart is still stressed while it should be recovering, right? So looking at 40 to 50 BPM at rest, this is usually athletes and highly trained individuals. This range is typical among well-trained athletes whose efficient cardiovascular system results in lower heart rates. And then looking at the lower end of normal range, which is 50 to 60 BPM, while specific percentages do vary, a significant portion of healthy adults fall within this range, and cardiologists often consider 50 to 90 BPM as a desirable target for resting heart rate. However, like I've said, we're trying to optimize. So I would say for you to be in an optimal resting heart rate range, we need to be around 50 to 60, very highest. So you want to be in this lower end of normal, right? And then if you can push into sub 50, sub 40, sub 50, so in the 40s, then that's really, really good. And it just indicates that you are really restful during your sleep and your heart rate is lowering, so it's more efficient and it's getting a lot of recovery time. Then looking at 60 to 70 BPM, which is the average resting heart rate. In a study of 35,000 American adults aged over 40, the average RHR was 71 BPM for men and 73 for women, placing most individuals in this bracket. And obviously health risks are associated with a 70 plus BPM, which is an elevated resting heart rate. RHR exceeding 90 BPM is linked to increased all-cause mortality with a hazard ratio of 1.22. Additionally, patients with myocardial infarction and admission heart rates over 90 BPM experience higher mortality rates, increasing from 15% to 41%. Then looking at some of this data from CDC, again, this is obviously awake resting heart rate. And then we have the women on the right and the men on the left. And obviously looking at the high, so percentile in the middle, this is probably the average, but if you come down into these lower ranges, this is ideally where you want to be for optimal. So dropping down below 60 and ideally even below 50 BPM into the 40s would be ideal as well. But obviously this is for most people, and there's not many people that of the population have that such a low heart rate. But it just gives you a visual aid as to where most people fall and how or where you need to improve on to actually be optimized and be functioning at that higher level. Okay, so maintaining a resting heart rate within 50 to 70 BPM range is generally associated with better cardiovascular health and increased longevity. Regular physical activity, stress management, and a balanced diet can help achieve and sustain a healthy heart rate. And obviously this is really important, as I said, for ensuring your heart recovers at night, it recovers within sleep, your heart doesn't turn off, and the only time it gets to recover is during sleep, and that time is for it to downregulate, lower the activity of itself. And if your heart rate is still functioning at a high level, as it is when it's awake, then it's getting no time to rest and repair, etc., and heal. Therefore, you're going to be stressed, chronic stress ensues, and then you're going to have heart problems going forwards. So looking at this data below, this is my personal data from last week, I think. So resting heart rate for me is usually around 40, 41, 40, up towards 45. If I get like a 46, 48, my Oura ring thinks I'm stressed out. So it usually flags up red. I think the lowest I've logged is like a 39, 38, but I don't usually settle around there. My average is between 41 and 45. And my average for heart rate variability is 82, sometimes go up to 100. And then my low would be like in the 60s. And then respiratory rate, 12 breaths per minute. But we're not going to discuss this in this video. I've kind of discussed respiratory rate in some other videos I've done. And we'll go into heart rate variability now. So HRV measures the variation in time between successive heartbeats and serves as an indicator of autonomic nervous system health. HRV values can vary significantly based on age, gender, and individual health status. So let's break down the HRV ranges a little bit. All right, so looking at average HRV by age and gender. So we're going to just look at like 30 and 40 ages for now, just because it's middle ground. The average is obviously between 40 and 80 generally. But also if you can push these up higher through lifestyle adjustments, training, recovery modalities, then that's going to indicate a much better data point for HRV, and obviously more optimized healing, more optimized recovery, and general better overall well-being for yourself. We don't generally want to be in these lower ranges. I mean, obviously this is average based on the data, but you should be striving for optimal. Yeah. And obviously some further data on this. Obviously I brought back my readout from my Oura Ring here, looking at some Hoop data, and they've obviously put out that the average HRV for Hoop members is 64 ms. It is a metric that does fluctuate between people, so there's not generally like a 100% true reading, but we do see implications of the data, right? So if someone's on the very low side, then that's going to indicate that you have low stress tolerance, especially if that is chronically low, right? Or if you get a spike that drops down or goes up too high. So ideally for most people, I'd say try to get in the range of 70 to 80, and that's going to be optimal for you. If you can push things up even higher, that would be really good. So factors influencing HRV, age, obviously HRV tends to decrease with advanced age. Gender, males often exhibit higher HRV values compared to females. And then fitness levels, of course, individuals with higher cardiovascular fitness typically have elevated HRV. So that's an indicator that you should try and increase your cardiovascular fitness to improve your HRV, right? And then health status, chronic conditions like hypertension and diabetes can reduce HRV. So interpreting HRV values, obviously HRV is highly individualized rather than compared to population averages. It's beneficial just to monitor personal data and trends over time. And in significant deviations from one's baseline, it may indicate stress, fatigue, or potential health issues. Now, if you're monitoring your own data, and let's say you start monitoring and you're resting around 50 ms, but with lifestyle and habitual changes, you start to notice your HRV increasing towards 60, 70, 80 and beyond, then you're doing something really good. And that's positive. You're improving your capacity to recover. You're improving your stress tolerance, but also improving your overall optimal health and how well your body functions, right? So looking at how we can improve HRV, obviously regular physical activity, engage in aerobic exercises like running, rowing, or cycling. Stress management, of course, incorporate relaxation techniques such as meditation or yoga. Of course, adequate sleep, aim for 7 to 9 hours of quality sleep per night. Healthy diet, maintain a balanced diet rich in nutrients. And of course, monitoring HRV can offer valuable insights into cardiovascular health and overall well-being. Utilizing wearable devices that track HRV can assist in making informed lifestyle choices. Strongly suggest everyone wear some sort of health wearable device to track these metrics, to assess where you're at, but also to assess changes you make for improvements. And of course, adequate sleep is crucial for maintaining optimal health, with the recommended duration for adults being 7 to 9 hours per night. Deviations from this range, particularly shorter sleep durations, have been associated with various health risks. And of course, 7 to 9 hours of sleep is optimal for health benefits. Consistently obtaining 7 to 9 hours of quality sleep is linked to numerous health benefits, including improved mood, improved cognitive function, and a reduced risk of chronic diseases. A stable sleep schedule within this range is associated with successful aging and overall well-being. Less than 7 hours, you begin to increase health risks. Regularly sleeping less than 7 hours per night has been associated with several adverse health outcomes, which include cardiovascular issues, obesity, and mental health concerns, right? And then obviously once you start to get less than that, looking at 5 to 6 hours of sleep, you're going to have elevated mortality risks. So sleeping less than 5 to 6 hours per night further exacerbates health risks, premature death. A study involving nearly 47,000 adults found that inadequate sleep can increase the risk of premature death by up to 29%. And of course, metabolic disorders, sleep deprivation is linked to insulin resistance, increasing risk of type 2 diabetes, but also generally how your metabolism function each day and how well you can metabolize energy. And that's not a good place to be. So looking at the physical debt, the hidden cost of neglecting your body, in the same way that financial debt compounds over time, neglecting key physical health markers leads to physical debt, a decline in resilience, decline in performance, and long-term health. If you fall below these thresholds, you're not just out of shape, you're setting yourself up for chronic fatigue, low energy, increased injury risk, and a shorter health span. This isn't just about lifting weights or running faster. These metrics reflect how well your body handles stress, how well you recover, and how resilient you are. Poor strength, low endurance, and inadequate recovery translate into lower productivity, reduced cognitive function, and a higher susceptibility to illness and burnout. So this is what I put together for that physical data in this table. So looking at sleep duration, heart rate variability, resting heart rate, VO2 max, pull-ups, bench press, squat, and deadlift. If you're sleeping less than 5 to 6 hours per night, you're increasing risk of obesity, heart disease, and cognitive decline, chronic fatigue, and poor stress tolerance. Heart rate variability, consistently lower than 50 ms. Obviously, the consequences are indication of high stress, poor nervous system balance, and increased risk of burnout. Then looking at heart rate, for resting heart rate, consistently above 50 to 60 BPM is poor cardiovascular fitness, higher stress levels, and increased risk of heart disease. Now looking at VO2 max, below 30 to 40, obviously indicates reduced cardiovascular efficiency, poor endurance, and higher mortality risks. Then obviously our strength metrics, less than 5 to 8 for men, less than 3 women, you're in that weaker percentile of the population, weak upper body strength, poor grip strength linked to longevity, and low muscular endurance. Bench press, less than 1 times body weight for men, less than half body weight for women. Again, poor upper body strength and low pushing power and impacting functional fitness. Looking at the squat, less than 1.5 times body weight for men and 1 times body weight for women is weaker lower body strength, poor mobility, and increased risk of injury. And as if you don't know already, lower body strength is highly correlated with longevity of life. And there's many studies that actually highlighting that now. Finally, the deadlift, less than 2 times body weight for men and less than 1.25 body weight for women. Obviously, consequences indicate low total body strength, poor posture training development, and reduced movement efficiency. Now, obviously, we've covered quite a lot of things here. If you're like ticking some of these and you're excelling at others, then obviously that highlights what areas you need to work on to optimize your body and reduce this physical debt and the consequences. So if you're like meeting the benchmark standards but not meeting a deadlift, not meeting the cardio, then there's clear areas you need to work on and improve on going forwards. So why does this matter, right? If you're below these numbers, you're operating at a disadvantage, not just in the gym, but in life and business. This is poor health, poor stress tolerance, and low physical mental performance in action, which obviously leads into poor recovery, chronic fatigue, brain fog, low strength, increased injury risk, and poor stress resilience, weak endurance, low energy, and poor stress adaptation, and bad cardiovascular fitness, which obviously increases mortality risk. In short, if you're aging faster, performing worse, and putting yourself at risk for long-term health problems, right? What is the solution? Start reversing your physical debt by raising these standards. Strength, endurance, and recovery aren't just fitness goals. They're the foundation of a high-performance life. Right, hope you enjoyed that. DM if you want help to optimize your health and performance. If you're not already, like the video. If you've got any questions, hit me in the comments, and I will see you on the next one.